Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Athena Strand. Athena Strand was born on May 25, 2015 in the small town of Duncan, Oklahoma, USA. Her parents divorced and her father moved to Texas while Athena still lived with her mother in Oklahoma. Despite living far apart, her father kept in touch and visited her whenever possible. Sometimes her mother would bring Athena to see her father so they could spend time together. Both her parents remarried later and Athena had two younger sisters. Athena was a cheerful, sociable child. She loved to play and spend a lot of time outdoors. In the winter of 2022, when Athena was 7 years old, she temporarily left Oklahoma to live with her father in Texas until the New Year holidays ended. During this time, Athena attended a local elementary school. Her father's house was located in a remote rural area, surrounded by forests and vast fields. Here, Athena had a great time exploring nature with her father and also built a good relationship with his new wife, Elizabeth. On November 30th, Athena returned home from school at around 4:15 p.m., just like every other day. She was home alone with her mother, Elizabeth, because her father and grandfather had gone hunting. That evening, Athena had an argument with Elizabeth. Athena finally felt upset and decided to go to her own room. Meanwhile, Elizabeth went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. After about 20 minutes, Elizabeth went to Athena's room to call her to dinner, but she was gone. She started searching the whole house but couldn't find Athena anywhere. Elizabeth called a relative of her husband who lived nearby. Although Athena often visited the relatives, this time the relatives said that she was missing. Next, Elizabeth called her husband and told him about the situation. Her husband immediately asked her to contact the police and return home immediately. When she got home, Elizabeth called the 911 emergency number at around 6:40. Only 14 minutes later, the police arrived at her house. She explained the situation to the police and said that she thought Athena might have left home because of an argument between mother and child. Initially, the police seemed suspicious of Elizabeth because she had reported the child missing 40 minutes after discovering the incident. However, after listening to her description of the search around the house and contacting family members, they concluded that she might be telling the truth. The police immediately began searching the surrounding area. Although it was already dark, they still organized a search force within a radius of several kilometers around the house. They believed that the child might have gotten lost in the dark and needed urgent help. They focused on searching the entire area, including the woods and fields. Police also considered the possibility of kidnapping but found no evidence to support this theory. There was no sign of an intruder in the house and no strange noises or screams that night. Police received support from family and town residents in their efforts to find the missing Athena. The girl's mother quickly arrived at the scene after learning of her daughter's disappearance. But the results were still inconclusive as no trace of Athena was found. The search became more difficult, as the area around the house was quite difficult to access, especially at night. Therefore, the police continued the search at 7 a.m. the next morning with more police officers joining in. As news of the disappearance spread, hundreds of volunteers volunteered to join the search effort. Some came on horses and ATVs, while police used drones and helicopters equipped with thermal cameras to search for Athena. By the end of the day, Athena had still not been found. Police were concerned for her safety because of the cold weather at the beginning of winter. Although Texas is a small southern state, the temperature had dropped to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Since the girl was wearing thin clothes, it would be really difficult to endure such weather. On the third day, the search continued, and the police expanded the area to search for Athena. The police became increasingly suspicious that Athena had left the house on her own. During these days, they searched for miles in all directions, but they could not find the girl. The police identified the people who were near Athena's house that night. However, Athena's house was located in a special location, far from the main road, and there were no surveillance cameras in the area. However, they quickly got some important clues. A courier service had delivered to Athena's house that evening. The police contacted the courier company and learned that the delivery to the address was entrusted to an outside contractor. They then contacted that contractor and determined that the truck had arrived at Athena's house. Each of these trucks was equipped with surveillance cameras. So the police asked for footage from November 30th. After rewinding the time the truck arrived at the house, the police saw the driver dragging a girl who looked like Athena into the car. The police quickly identified the driver as Tanner Hearer, 31, and the police went to his address. Shortly thereafter, the man was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and taken in for questioning. As soon as the police mentioned the video evidence, Tanner began to speak. He explained that he had actually delivered a package to Athena's house that evening. While backing up the truck, he heard a crash and went to check what had happened. There, he saw the girl lying on the ground and realized that he had accidentally hit her with his car. As he approached, Tanner noticed that the girl was not seriously injured. She was conscious and spoke to him calmly. The girl said her name was Athena. He started to feel scared. He decided to take her into the truck and try to figure out how to solve the problem. The girl continued to talk to him and said that she would tell her father about this, and Tanner became more and more worried. He didn't know what to do with the situation, because he knew that if she told an adult about the incident, he could get into legal trouble. According to Tanner, he could not think of a better way than to kill her. He thought the best way would be to break her neck, but he could not do it. He then strangled Athena to death with his hands. He hid Athena's body in a nearby river. Tanner gave the police the exact location where he left Athena. So the police went there and found Athena's body. The murder shocked not only her family but also thousands of people across the country. All major media outlets reported the case and many were horrified by the brutality. After the body was found, Tanner was charged with kidnapping and murder. While waiting for the medical examiner's report, the police scrutinized Tanner's identity, trying to better understand his motives. Tanner's account of the events did not seem plausible. According to Tanner, he lightly hit the girl with his heart valve, causing no serious injuries to her. However, Tanner was so depressed that he immediately decided to kill her, thinking that beating a child would cost him his job. Tanner's story seems very strange. Police found out that this man was engaged and had a 1-year-old child. In addition to delivering goods, he occasionally worked as an Uber driver. Tanner's daily life, he participated in performing in a band at several cafes in the nearby city of Fort Worth. On social media, he often posted photos with his son, snapshots during music performances, and other moments of his daily life. These images do not show that he was a cruel person. There is no information about his previous criminal record before his arrest. Police also found no indication that he might be a dangerous criminal. Meanwhile, Athena's parents filed a lawsuit against FedEx and the contracting company, accusing them of allowing Tanner to work. They called for higher standards for employee screening to prevent such crimes in the future. Police investigators said the package Tanner delivered that evening was a Christmas gift Athena's parents had ordered for her. It was a Barbie doll she had long wanted. However, when the results of the medical examination were released, the case became more complicated. Experts said Athena died within an hour of being kidnapped. Her body had suffered various degrees of injury and the primary cause of her death was asphyxiation. Police then outlined a series of events that could have led to the incident. After an argument with her mother, Athena decided to go outside and stand in the yard. At this time, Tanner arrived to make a delivery and found her alone. According to this theory, he saw an opportunity to satisfy his lust. The area around Athena's house was quite isolated, and the police believe that Tanner may have tricked or deliberately attacked Athena to get her into the car without encountering any resistance. It is still unclear what happened next. There are two main possibilities that seem most plausible. First, Tanner may have planned to take Athena out of the house to carry out his evil intentions, but the girl started screaming or tried to escape. Fearing discovery, Tanner killed the girl and dumped her body in the river. Second, Tanner may have committed some kind of harassment against Athena that did not involve direct contact. In this case, medical experts would not find evidence of sexual assault. To learn more, police spent weeks digging into Tanner's past. They spoke to his relatives, friends, and acquaintances, looking for any signs that he might have been involved in other criminal activities. There was a major breakthrough in the investigation. The police found several people who said they had been assaulted by Tanner when they were children. However, the identities of these people have not been released to protect the investigation. One of Tanner's victims went public with her story of being assaulted by him when she was 16. She shared her story on social media in an attempt to gain attention. Surprisingly, Tanner faced no consequences for his actions and was not even considered a suspect for a long time. Sadly, the victim wrote that no one believed her during those years. However, after Tanner killed Athena, these allegations received more attention, exposing Tanner's true nature. Now Tanner will also face separate trials for 4 sexual assaults involving minors. In preparation for the trial, the government announced that they would seek the death penalty. Tanner himself has hired a lawyer to advise him to withdraw his confession and declare his innocence, but this is unlikely to help him avoid punishment, as the police have video footage from the truck as well as Tanner's testimony about the exact location of the body. We can only watch the trial unfold and wait for more details to become public. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Crystal Perry. Crystal Perry had been born on August 23, 1963, in Rumford, Maine, the youngest of 10 children. Her parents had faced significant difficulties providing for their large family, leading Crystal and her siblings to grow up independent. Crystal and her siblings had always wanted to build their own lives as soon as possible. They eventually moved to different cities and states in search of new opportunities. Crystal had met her future husband Tom in high school. Crystal and Tom married and initially moved to California, but Crystal soon discovered that life in the city was not right for her. After a year and a half, they decided to return to Maine, settling in the small town of Bridgeton, about an hour from Crystal's hometown of Rumford. Crystal found a job at a local shoe store, while Tom worked various odd jobs. Crystal and Tom's lives took a new turn when Crystal became pregnant and they welcomed daughter Sarah. Although Tom was initially excited to become a father, Sarah's arrival complicated Tom's relationship with Crystal. Tom began spending more and more time at a local bar, spending almost all of their limited income on alcohol. One time, he even took the money Crystal had saved to buy alcohol, leaving them with almost nothing. As Tom's drinking habits worsened, the family did not have enough money for basic needs, including food. Finally, Crystal decided to file for divorce. After the divorce, Tom occasionally saw Sarah, but he was largely absent from her life. The situation got worse when Tom got a new girlfriend and she started harassing Crystal. This girlfriend would call Crystal, make threats, come to her house, and cause provocations, all because she was upset with Crystal's past relationship with Tom. Crystal's fears for Sarah's safety grew and she became hesitant to let her daughter visit Tom, worried that Tom's new girlfriend might actually harm Sarah. Crystal moved in with her mother and worked hard to save enough money to buy her own house. After years of saving, she bought a small house near a peaceful lake on the outskirts of Bridgeton. Crystal was excited to provide a stable and loving environment for her daughter, Sarah. Crystal prioritized giving Sarah the attention and love she deserved. In their free time, Crystal and Sarah enjoyed spending quality time together, often watching movies or chatting with each other. One day was like any other day. Crystal went to work, and Sarah went to school. They had their usual dinner together, and Crystal carried Sarah to bed. However, a few hours later, Sarah's peaceful night was broken by a loud scream that startled her. At first, she thought Crystal was arguing on the phone, but it quickly became clear that there was something much more serious going on with Crystal. Crystal had been screaming loudly in the kitchen, causing Sarah to fear that her mother was being attacked. The bedroom door had been slightly open, but the kitchen was out of sight. Stiff with fear, Sarah could not move or make a sound. As she listened, she heard footsteps approaching, making her think that the next attacker would come for her. Feeling scared, she quickly hid behind the bed. However, the footsteps stopped, and Sarah heard the sound of a kitchen drawer opening, followed by the clatter of someone rummaging through utensils. Crystal's screams continued, filled with pleas for mercy, until she was stabbed. With each stab, Crystal's voice grew weaker. Sarah realized she could do nothing and would likely be killed as well. After her mother's screams stopped, she left the room and went into the kitchen, where she witnessed a terrible scene. Her mother lay in a large pool of blood covering the floor. Confused, Sarah asked her neighbors for help and eventually found an Italian restaurant whose owner lived in an adjacent building. They opened the door for Sarah and called 911 to report the incident. The officers immediately went to their home. Upon arrival, officers witnessed a gruesome scene. The kitchen was covered in blood, including the floors, walls, and kitchen appliances. Crystal had died, and medical experts determined that Crystal had lost too much blood. Police found a handprint on the front door glass, possibly Sarah's. No other fingerprints were found, but there were many bloody shoe prints on the kitchen floor. Investigators took photos to determine the shoe size and model, assuming they belonged to the killer. A trail of blood led to Sarah's bedroom but suddenly stopped as if the killer had changed his mind. One particular detail caught the detective's attention. The killer had tried to wipe away some blood on the floor. With the blood stains spreading, this effort seemed futile. Further investigation revealed that some of the drops of blood on the floor were irregularly shaped, suggesting they had fallen from the knife. This led investigators to believe that drops of blood might have flown out of the knife during the attack. Investigations showed that, in addition to the initial drops of blood, other drops of blood on the floor appeared to have fallen at a 90-degree angle, suggesting they originated from a higher point. Detectives suspected these drops might belong to the perpetrator, who might have been injured during the crime. Further supporting this theory, the trail of blood drops led directly to a roll of tissue. This showed that the perpetrator used a tissue to stop the bleeding before hastily leaving the scene. Autopsy results showed that Crystal's body had suffered more than 50 stab wounds. The murder weapon, possibly a kitchen knife, was not found at the crime scene, suggesting the perpetrator might have brought it with him. An important detail revealed that the force used was so great that part of the knife broke and was stuck in Crystal's body. The investigation also found evidence of a previous sexual assault. As a result, medical experts were able to collect and analyze the perpetrator's semen along with the blood samples obtained, sending both for further laboratory testing. However, there was a problem. The local DNA laboratory was severely understaffed due to funding problems, leading to a significant backlog. As a result, detectives had to begin the investigation without forensic evidence, which would take at least 6 months to process. The investigation began by ruling out robbery as a motive because nothing was missing from the house. Furthermore, there were no signs of forced entry, so the police suspected that the victim had arbitrarily opened the door to let the perpetrator in. Since she was wearing pajamas, it was unlikely that she was expecting visitors. Detectives came up with 2 theories. Either the victim knew her killer, or someone she didn't know knocked on her door and convinced her to let them in under false pretenses. To pursue this lead, detectives turned their attention to the only witness, Sarah, who was undergoing a medical examination at the hospital. The police began questioning Sarah about the killer, and she explained that she had stayed in the bedroom until the incident was over. However, the police were a bit skeptical about her story. They asked her how she knew her mother had been attacked with a knife, and Sarah replied that it was obvious. Despite her reaction, detectives continued to pressure her, suspecting that she might have been withholding information and might have seen the perpetrator. During the first 3 days after the murder, police questioned Sarah 18 times in the hope that her story would change. However, she always maintained that everything happened as she initially described. Meanwhile, detectives pursued other leads and achieved their first breakthrough. They discovered a pair of boots at a local shoe store whose sole pattern resembled bloody footprints found at the crime scene. Additionally, they learned that Crystal had been harassed by Teresa, Crystal's ex-husband's girlfriend. Despite evidence that the killer was a man, the police decided to investigate Teresa, considering her history of threatening to kill Crystal. Maybe Teresa had found an accomplice to commit the crime. However, detectives found no evidence to support this theory. Further investigation revealed that Crystal was in a relationship with a man named Dennis at the time of her death. The two had met 2 years ago when Dennis started working at the shoe store. Dennis and Crystal began dating, and Dennis eventually proposed to her. Although Crystal accepted, they never married. Their relationship was tense, with frequent arguments and Dennis engaging in aggressive behavior, such as breaking objects and banging on walls. However, there was no evidence that he ever physically harmed Crystal. The day after Crystal's murder, detectives visited Dennis at his home. When they asked if he had left the house the night before or if he had seen Crystal, Dennis immediately asked if she was dead and then fainted. After regaining consciousness, he answered the detectives' questions. Dennis explained that he had planned to visit Crystal that evening but was delayed because he was helping a friend fix his car. When he later called Crystal, she said it was too late, leading to an argument and Dennis staying home. Police were able to verify Dennis' alibi, confirming that he had helped his friend that evening. Dennis also agreed to take a polygraph test, which showed no signs of deception, except when asked if he felt responsible for Crystal's death. He replied no, but the test detected his tremors. Additionally, detectives discovered that Dennis had the same shoe size as the killer, but no matching shoes were found in his house. Dennis agreed to provide a DNA sample but made a special request. Dennis had made a special request to the detectives. If they decided to arrest him, he had asked them to enter his workplace through the back door, instead of the main entrance. He had explained that he did not want to disrupt the work environment or make noise in front of his colleagues because his boss had always treated him kindly. However, because he had continued to claim innocence, this request had raised suspicions. The police investigation had led to another important discovery. They had contacted Crystal's best friend, who lived in another town, and she had revealed that Crystal had confided in her just weeks before the murder. Crystal had expressed her fear towards Dennis, saying their arguments had escalated and had become more and more heated. Dennis' behavior had also become more and more aggressive, causing Crystal to consider ending their relationship. However, she had hesitated to do so because she was afraid of his reaction. Detectives had also interviewed one of Crystal's co-workers, but she had not provided any useful information during their conversation. However, as soon as the police had left, Dennis had gone to the person's workplace and had begun asking about her conversation with the detectives. The police investigation had continued despite the lack of evidence against the initial suspect, as DNA test results would have taken several months to process. Meanwhile, they had pursued other leads. A strange tip had led them to a local man named Donnie, who had allegedly bragged about killing Crystal while drunk at a party. However, when questioned, Donnie had claimed to have no memory of the party and had denied any involvement in the murder. The police investigation into Crystal's murder had had difficulty finding any concrete clues. In an effort to uncover new information, Crystal's family had offered a $10,000 reward and had distributed flyers around town. However, Teresa, Crystal's ex-husband's girlfriend, had been seen repeatedly tearing up these flyers, raising suspicions. The ex-husband, Tom, had been thoroughly investigated but had eventually been ruled out as a suspect due to his severe alcoholism. His heavy daily drinking had made it unlikely he would commit a crime, and he had had no clear motive. Police had also investigated 2 other men Crystal had dated after her divorce but had found no evidence linking them to the crime. All 3 men, including Tom, had provided DNA samples to be sent to a laboratory for analysis. 9 months after the murder, the lab results had finally come in, but they hadn't matched any of the suspects, including Dennis. This had left detectives with no new leads. They had asked to take Dennis's DNA sample again for further testing, but the results had still been the same. The investigation into Crystal's murder had hit a dead end, causing detectives to reinvestigate their only witness, Sarah. They had suspected that Sarah might be hiding information or that a traumatic experience had caused her to repress memories of the killer. To question her further, police had gone to Texas, where Sarah was living with her aunt. A polygraph test had been administered to Sarah, but the results hadn't shown any deception. Despite this, investigators had continued to question her for days, asking the same questions over and over again. However, Sarah had always maintained that she had not seen the killer. The case had remained unsolved for several years. Police had continued to interview potential suspects and follow up on leads. But to no avail. The breakthrough had come in the late 1990s with the introduction of the FBI's DNA database. Investigators had uploaded the killer's DNA sample, but unfortunately, no matches had been found. The detective asked Sarah to work with a psychologist to try to recall any repressed memories of the crime. Even though Sarah agreed, the psychologist ultimately concluded that she really didn't remember anything and was telling the truth about not seeing the killer. The case remained unsolved for many years. Detectives continued to investigate but found no new leads. This changed in 2006 when a surprising development occurred. A DNA sample was entered into the FBI database and it matched blood and semen left at the crime scene where Crystal was killed. The DNA belonged to a man named Michael Hutchinson, who was never suspected in the case. Detectives discovered that in 2003, Hutchinson was arrested for assault and threatening with a weapon, resulting in a sentence of 6 months in prison and 3 years of probation. During his arrest, a DNA sample was collected, but it was not uploaded to the FBI database at the time. It was instead stored in a laboratory. 3 years after the initial DNA sample was taken, Michael was arrested for drunk driving with his children. He was released on bail but failed to appear in court, leading to jail time. Ironically, Michael was arrested on the day of the wedding and put in a prison cell. His DNA sample was retrieved and quickly uploaded to the database. The detective contacted Sarah, informing her of the development but asked her to keep the information confidential until formal charges were filed. When asked if she knew the suspect, Sarah replied that she did not. Given that Michael was already in custody, the detective carefully built the case to prevent any possibility of him evading punishment. Further investigation revealed that at the time of the murder, Michael lived in Bridgeton, just 2 miles from Crystal's residence. When he was 19, Michael lived near the Italian restaurant where Sarah called the police. He regularly drove to his mother's house, which was just a short distance from Crystal's, meaning he often passed by her residence. The detective discovered that Michael could have easily encountered Crystal multiple times before the murder. When questioned in prison, Michael insisted he was not involved in Crystal's murder and denied knowing her, despite the presence of his semen and blood on her body at the crime scene. The detective found his denial unconvincing. During the visit to the prison, the detective observed the noticeable scar on Michael's palm. This was very significant because it was likely that Crystal's killer injured his hand during the crime. While this alone would not have been enough evidence in court, combined with DNA evidence, it contributed to Michael's eventual murder charge. According to the prosecution, Michael, an illegal drug user, saw Crystal as he passed her house on the night of the murder. He decided to assault her, leading to her death. While Michael refused to confess, the available evidence clearly showed that he was responsible for the assault and murder of Crystal. During the trial, an explanation was found for the murderer's lack of fingerprints at the crime scene. It turned out that Michael's job as a bricklayer was the reason. Over time, the constant wear and tear on his hands had erased the patterns on his palms, making it impossible for him to leave fingerprints. Michael presented testimony about his timeline to defend himself. He claimed he had met Crystal at a bar and they had returned to her place to have consensual sex. However, his story became suspicious when he described a strange man wearing a black motorcycle jacket breaking into the house, knocking him unconscious, and killing Crystal. When Michael regained consciousness, he allegedly tried to fight off the attacker but had injured his hand. The attacker then fled, and Michael also left the crime scene without a reasonable explanation. Michael's story was very unconvincing. The investigation revealed that the only shoe prints at the scene had belonged to Michael. If his story was true, the intruder would have had to take off his shoes before entering the house, which still wouldn't have explained the lack of other marks on the floor. Furthermore, no witnesses had come forward to confirm that Crystal had been at the bar with Michael. The trial ended on April 9, 2007, with Michael being unanimously found guilty. As a result, he received a life sentence without the possibility of parole and remained incarcerated. Sarah's life was deeply affected by her mother's death, but she found the strength to move forward with time. She pursued further education, became a writer, and wrote a book about her mother's murder. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Debbie Lynn Randall. Debbie Lynn Randall was born on August 21, 1962, in Marietta, Georgia, to a loving family with two older brothers. Her parents divorced when she was young. Her mother later married a man named Roy, who became Debbie's stepfather. The family lived in a small apartment building. Debbie was a cheerful and sociable child. On the evening of January 13, 1972, after dinner with her family, Debbie went to the laundromat to supervise the laundry. Debbie's home was just a short distance from the laundromat, so her mother wasn't overly concerned about her safety when she was sent to do the laundry. The original plan was for Debbie to go with her brother, but he was feeling unwell, so Debbie's mother sent her husband to pick up the laundry and Debbie went with her stepfather, holding a box of laundry detergent. At the laundromat, Roy put the clothes in 2 washing machines and left, leaving Debbie waiting for the cycle to finish. After the wash, Debbie had to walk home and ask someone to pick up her clean clothes because she couldn't carry them herself. However, when the laundry should have been finished and Debbie still hadn't returned, her mother began to feel uneasy. It was getting dark outside, so she and her husband decided to walk to the laundromat to look for Debbie, but she was nowhere to be found. The employee informed them that Debbie had left the laundromat some time ago and had not returned. The news worried her mother, who began searching the surrounding streets with Roy. As they walked, they discovered a suspicious scene. A short distance from the laundromat, in the parking lot next to a car, there was a spilled detergent. Since Debbie had brought a box of detergent with her, her mother suspected that it might be hers. Despite expanding their search to the entire parking lot and the surrounding area, they found no other sign of Debbie. Neighbors who knew the family joined in the search. Debbie's mother decided to call the police for help. The police investigated the parking lot and discovered their first clue: spilled laundry detergent just inches from a parked car, and on the car door, they found several clear fingerprints. The police found fresh fingerprints on the car that were located lower than the handle, which seemed unusual. They suspected that an unknown person might have grabbed the girl while touching the car at this spot. The officers collected the fingerprints and sent them to forensic experts for analysis. They also started searching for the car's owner to confirm whether the fingerprints belonged to them. With no other leads, the police began a thorough search of the area, looking for new clues or witnesses. The laundry worker reported that she did not see anything suspicious. Debbie had waited for the laundry to finish, then left the building with the detergent box. It is possible that she went home to ask someone to pick up her clothes. Police discovered the first key witness, 12-year-old Sandra, who said that as she and her friend walked to a laundromat to drop off dirty clothes, they saw a man grab a girl on the street, drag her to his car parked near the laundromat, and drive away quickly while she screamed for help. Sandra and her friend were lucky to avoid the man's car. Debbie screamed in a car, but he did not slow down. At the time, Sandra did not consider what she saw to be a kidnapping. She assumed the man was a family member who had come to pick Debbie up, possibly against her will. So Sandra did not report the incident to the authorities or tell any adults about it. After learning about Debbie's disappearance, Sandra provided essential details to investigators. She described the abductor's vehicle as a dark-colored, likely 1957 model pickup truck. She also described the man as young, white, with thick dark hair, wearing a white t-shirt, jeans, and black work boots. Another key witness, a girl who lived in the same building as Debbie, shared her observations. She saw a dark-colored pickup truck drive past the apartment building on the evening in question. The girl initially thought the driver of the car was her uncle, but when he stopped in front of her and looked at her, she realized it was someone else. She described the driver as a white man with medium-length dark hair and provided additional details about his appearance. She also reported that he parked his car near their building, next to the same car where a detergent spill would later be discovered. Another witness, a man who lived near the girl's home, reported that a dark-colored pickup truck, possibly a Dodge, almost hit him while he was driving to visit his wife in the hospital. The driver appeared to be in his 30s with dark hair, and the witness saw a girl in the car trying to escape while the driver held her with one arm. Based on these accounts, the police believed Debbie had been kidnapped. They circulated the suspect's vehicle to all patrol units and created a composite sketch of the driver based on descriptions from witnesses. Some officers searched for similar vehicles and checked their owners, while others conducted a wide-ranging search for the girl. As the days passed, more volunteers and police from surrounding towns joined the search. Police questioned Debbie's family, and after investigation, they were all cleared as potential suspects. Debbie's biological father, who lived in the same city, was notified of her disappearance at work and immediately joined the search effort. Police also ran background checks on convicted criminals who lived near Debbie's home, but none of them appeared to be viable suspects. The search for Debbie continued for over 2 weeks without any significant leads. It wasn't until January 29th, when a group of students joined the search teams, that a breakthrough occurred. The students were sent to search a wooded area several miles from Debbie's house. After nearly 5 hours of searching, one of the students noticed a set of tracks on the ground that led from the trail into the forest, suggesting that something had been dragged into the woods. As they followed the trail about 150 feet into the woods, they discovered a human body and immediately contacted the police. Upon further inspection, they quickly identified the body as Debbie Randall. She was wearing the same outfit her mother had described on the day she went missing. However, her shoes were missing. The medical examination of the Debbie's body revealed that she had been strangled to death and had also been sexually assaulted. A single dark hair was found on her body, which was likely to belong to the killer. Although DNA analysis was not available at the time, experts were able to examine the hair under a microscope and estimate that it came from a man between the ages of 18 and 30. The investigation then focused on the victim's clothing, which was covered in soil. Police enlisted the help of a geologist to analyze the soil, along with a forensic team. They discovered that some of the soil contained a type of soil mined less than 10 miles from their town called North Georgia clay. However, other stains on the clothing were found to be from a different type of clay, mined by a company just 2 miles from where the body was found. Police theorized that the perpetrator did not kill Debbie immediately, but rather drove her to remote areas, sexually assaulting her in one location and killing her in another, before finally dumping her body in the woods. Police believe the killer may have been hired by one of the nearby mining companies. After contacting these companies, the police searched the employees of both companies but did not find the suspect or the vehicle described by the victims. Furthermore, they found fingerprints near the abduction site, but unfortunately, when these fingerprints were compared to the suspects, there was no match. Debbie's death sent shockwaves through the city, with thousands attending her funeral. Police repeatedly ran into roadblocks in their search for clues. Police officer Morris Nix investigated many suspects and eventually narrowed the list down to 4 people. For Morris Nix, Debbie's murder remained a top priority throughout his career. The case took a breakthrough with the creation of the FBI's DNA database. Experts successfully extracted a genetic profile from hair found on Debbie's body, which was then entered into the database. However, no matches were found. In 2015, 43 years after the murder, police reopened the case and decided to re-examine the victim's clothing using modern technology. The clothing had been stored in an evidence vault since the crime. When re-examined, some of the evidence had degraded over time, resulting in only a partial DNA profile. In 2018, Debbie's mother gave an interview, expressing her hope that her daughter's killer would be found. After the tragedy, she found it unbearable to stay in their apartment, so she moved to another city. Her only wish was for the case to be solved before she died. Sadly, she died of cancer at the age of 78, just weeks after the interview, and was buried next to Debbie. In 2019, the local police department received additional funding, which allowed them to conduct a more thorough analysis of Debbie's clothing. This time, experts successfully extracted a full DNA sample, but unfortunately, the perpetrator's DNA was still not found in the FBI database. Debbie's father was interviewed and shared that he thought about his daughter every day for decades. Sadly, he passed away in 2022, shortly after the interview. Police turned their attention to the first piece of evidence they had, DNA. They partnered with a Florida company that specializes in an advanced DNA analysis technique called genomics. Police provided the company with all the biological samples they had collected over the years and waited for the results. Experts created a DNA profile of the suspect and began searching for his relatives in public genetic databases. After analyzing thousands of potential relatives of the killer, investigators narrowed their search to a family in Marietta. In 2023, police asked the family to provide a DNA sample, which they agreed to. Analysis showed that the killer was indeed a close relative of the family. Experts re-examined the family tree and quickly identified a man named William Rose. However, William Rose committed suicide in 1974, just 2 years after Debbie's murder. Police obtained a warrant to exhume William Rose's remains and took a sample of William Rose's DNA for analysis. 51 years after Debbie's murder, police finally identified William Rose as the killer. At the time of the murder, William Rose, 24, lived in the same building as Debbie's family, and he visited them frequently. The case has finally been solved. Debbie's brother, Melvin, is the only living relative. Mel then attended a press conference and expressed gratitude to everyone involved in solving the case that lasted more than 50 years. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sheil Coughlin. Sheil Coughlin grew up on the west side of Manhattan. Shelley's life was marked by a love of learning and academic excellence, earning a degree in wealth management. This degree opened the door to a successful career in Swiss banking. Sheil's career flourished, and she became skilled at managing multi-million-dollar portfolios for her clients. However, despite her professional success and financial security, Sheil felt unfulfilled. She longed to start a family of her own and become a mother. In an effort to change her circumstances, Sheil attended a Jewish singles event in February 1998, where she met a 26-year-old man named Rod Coughlin, who also worked in the banking sector. Sheil and Rod were a young couple with many similar interests and ambitions. Their relationship developed quickly despite their significant age difference. They spent all their time together and then decided to get married, feeling that everything was just right. Some people thought they were rushing into marriage, but for Sheil and Rod, it was perfect. They had 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl, and their family was complete. However, their happy life was shattered on New Year's Eve 2009 when Sheil died in a tragic accident. At first, the police thought it was just a freak accident. On December 30, 2009, 2 police officers were finishing their night shift at a Manhattan police station. They received an emergency call from Rod Coughlin, Sheil's husband, who had called in a panic to report that he had found Sheil in her bathtub, submerged in blood, and that she was dead. He followed the police's instructions to pull her out of the water and attempt to resuscitate her. However, it soon became clear that his efforts to save her life would not be successful. As Sheil's body was cold and motionless, Rod Coughlin covered her with a blanket and waited for the police to arrive. Police quickly arrived and investigated the scene. Upon arrival, they assessed the situation and blocked off a downtown Manhattan street. Initially, officers suspected that Sheil's death may have been a suicide. Inside the apartment, the police found scattered children's toys. Proceeding to the bathroom, they discovered the Sheil wrapped in a blanket by her husband. The bloody water in the tub and the wet floor indicated that Rod Coughlin had recently pulled the body from the water. A bleeding wound on the back of Sheil's head was visible. Police found a torn hinge on the cabinet in the bathroom where Sheil died, suggesting she fell after losing her grip on the doorknob. Experts concluded there was no forced entry after checking around the house. The detective working the case decided to talk to the family members. During the interview, it was discovered that Sheil and Rod Coughlin's 9-year-old daughter was the first to discover her mother's body. Traumatized and shocked by what she saw, she told the police what had happened. It turned out that the night before, she and her younger brother had slept in their mother's bed. Waking up in the middle of the night and realizing that her mother was not there, she went looking for her and stumbled upon the horrifying scene in the bathroom. She quickly called her father, Rod Coughlin, who had recently separated from his mother and was downstairs. He rushed into the bathroom, pulled his wife's body out of the water, and called emergency services. Her account of the events matched Rod Coughlin's, supporting the theory that her death was an accident. The police informed Sheil's family of the tragic event, leaving everyone in shock. An autopsy and forensic examination were scheduled for the following day. When the medical examiner contacted investigators to begin the examination, he was surprised to learn that this procedure would not take place, despite being necessary. This left the examiner confused. It was later discovered that a rabbi from Sheil's synagogue had intervened. The rabbi contacted an organization responsible for burying Orthodox Jews, who then asked the police for permission to enter the scene in accordance with the family's religious rites. The police granted permission and a team of rabbis arrived at the scene. They cleaned up the blood in the bathtub and prepared Shiel's body for burial, in accordance with the family's beliefs. Unfortunately, this process destroyed all evidence and clues before they could be examined by the police forensic department. Orthodox Jewish tradition considers autopsies unacceptable because they involve defiling the body of the deceased. The rabbi quickly stepped in to support Shiel's grieving family, who were grateful for the rabbi's help. As a result, the family agreed to forego an autopsy and organize funeral arrangements. Shiel was buried within 24 hours, with hundreds of people attending to pay their respects. Shiel's parents questioned the cause of Shiel's death. Police told them that potential evidence had been destroyed during the cleanup. They thought that a fall in the bathtub would certainly have caused the accident. But the possibility of death from such an accident seemed unlikely. The family hired a private investigator to investigate the circumstances of her death and determine whether it was indeed an accident. The private investigator begins by going to the family home to talk to Shiel's relatives, and learns that Shiel's marriage to Rod Kovlin is having major problems. Their marriage began to fall apart after their 10th wedding anniversary in 2008. Rod Kovlin frequently changed jobs and developed a gambling addiction, spending a lot of money on gambling. Shiel felt neglected because Rod Kovlin spent a lot of time playing video games. Shiel was also frustrated by the amount of money Rod Kovlin's family spent on his frequent trips, and he was unfaithful to her. Shiel, after discovering his email cheating, she decided to end their marriage and began the process of getting a religious divorce. However, the formal divorce process will take some time to complete. Although they are separated and experiencing strain in their relationship, they has tried to maintain their relationship for the sake of their children. Despite this effort, conflicts and disagreements between Shiel and Rod Kovlin continued to arise. Shiel had recently confided in her loved ones about her grievances with Rod Kovlin, characterizing him as aggressive and hot-tempered. She felt uneasy and monitored. The private detective suspected that Rod Kovlin might have been involved in his wife Shiel's death due to the complexities in their marital life. To investigate further, the detective aimed to determine if a crime had occurred at the scene where Shiel's body was found. He planned to inspect her apartment, but the door was sealed, requiring him to obtain a court order to gain access. Upon arriving at the scene with New York police officers, the detective attempted to unlock the door with a provided key, but it wouldn't budge. Just then, Rod Kovlin appeared from his apartment, claiming he had heard a noise and came to investigate. When questioned by the police and the detective, Rod Kovlin took the key and easily opened the door. This raised suspicions. Had Rod Kovlin genuinely heard a noise, or was he deliberately keeping an eye on the situation? The detective searched the apartment for evidence of murder. Shiel's family said she was home on December 31st, but her phone was missing. A phone charger was found, but not the phone that he paid particular attention to the hinges, which investigators believed she had ripped off during a fall. The more he examined them, the more he suspected that, with Shiel's strength, ripping off hinges that were firmly attached to the cabinet was impossible. The detective discussed his findings with the police, trying to convince them that Shiel's death was not an accident, but a murder. However, the police remained unconvinced, citing a lack of evidence. Therefore, they decided to perform an autopsy to conclusively determine the cause of death. This decision caused a difficult debate with Shiel's family. The exhumation took place 2 weeks after Shiel had been buried. Her loved ones were deeply distressed by the decision. In the Jewish faith, exhumation is considered negative and many religious leaders oppose the practice. The family needed time to think about their next steps. They felt the need to find out the truth about their daughter's death, so they agreed to exhume her body. However, the exhumation process was difficult, so the family had to apply for a special order from the prosecutor's office. Even with the family's consent, they still had to make sure that all the necessary paperwork was completed. Once all the paperwork was completed, they proceeded with the exhumation and autopsy. The autopsy results showed that Sheil did not die from a fall, but from strangulation, which caused her to suffocate and break her neck. The official cause of Sheil's death was revised, and it was no longer considered an accident. Instead, it was officially ruled a murder. The detective's suspicions and efforts were vindicated. The autopsy results were instrumental in prompting the New York Police Department to reopen the investigation into Sheil's death. Detectives began scrutinizing new evidence, including phone records and bank statements. They also interviewed everyone who had interacted with Rod Coughlin and Sheil. The attorney shared information about Rod Coughlin and Sheil during the first divorce hearing in May 2009. Rod Coughlin claimed that he could not afford the money because he was unemployed, but the judge said that he had to give up gambling and electronics. In court, Rod Coughlin's true nature was exposed, and he continued to criticize Sheil, making false accusations about her lifestyle, finances, and behavior toward their son. He even called Sheil's workplace to defame her. In the subsequent divorce hearing on July 7, 2009, the court banned Rod Coughlin from spending time alone with the children, a ban that remained in place even after Sheil's death. The court also denied Rod Coughlin custody of the children and awarded custody to Rod Coughlin's parents through a social worker. This decision likely angered Rod Coughlin greatly. Police interviewed a former caregiver who had cared for Rod Coughlin's children before he fired her. It was discovered that on December 30th, Sheil had received an expensive keratin hair treatment that cost hundreds of dollars. The care instructions emphasized avoiding humidity in high temperatures for several days, essentially prohibiting baths or showers. Sheil's autopsy revealed no signs of bathing on the day of her death, leading investigators to speculate that she may not have taken a bath. Detectives reviewed surveillance footage from the building, which showed Rod Coughlin leaving his apartment at 4 a.m. on the day of the murder, dressed to go out. He returned a short time later. The building's security guard found this unusual, as Rod had never left the building that early. The security guard asked Rod Coughlin if he needed anything, but when he said no, Rod Coughlin returned with the chocolate bars and gave them to the security guard. Investigators believed that Rod Coughlin's actions were intentional to create an alibi, and as a result, he became the prime suspect. Sheil and Rod Coughlin were still married, which meant that absent a will or divorce, Rod Coughlin would inherit her estate, which was worth over $5 million. Additionally, on December 31, 2009, Sheil scheduled a meeting with her attorney to update her will and remove Rod Coughlin from the list of beneficiaries, which posed a significant threat to Rod Coughlin's rights and provided a clear motive for the crime. All of Sheil's assets were frozen in a safe deposit account. It is likely that Rod Coughlin knew about Sheil's plans to remove his name from her will, as he may have been monitoring her activities. A review of the surveillance footage revealed that Sheil had returned home at 8 p.m. the night before the crime, talking on her phone. However, the phone had gone missing after the crime. The investigators decided to conduct another search of the crime scene, and upon returning to the apartment, they quickly found Sheil's mobile phone lying on her bedside table, still connected to the charger. When questioned by the police, Rod Coughlin hired a lawyer, Ed, who advised him to remain silent. As a result, investigators had to continue searching for new evidence implicating Rod Coughlin. When they examined Rod Coughlin's phone records, they discovered frequent calls to the number of Deborah Holmes, a married woman with 3 children. 5 months before Sheil's murder, Rod Coughlin and Deborah met at a sick bow tournament and began a passionate affair. They often met at sick bow tournaments or played together online. Investigators saw an opportunity to gather information and decided to contact Deborah with a few questions. However, to their surprise, Deborah responded that her attorney had asked her not to cooperate. Faced with Deborah's refusal to speak, the police asked for the name of her attorney. The response revealed that Deborah and Rod Coughlin were the same attorney. As a last resort, the police searched Shields' newly discovered phone for incriminating text messages or electronic communications between Rod and Deborah. All data had been completely erased by a professional. Even skilled programmers were unable to recover the deleted messages. Over time, it became clear that he had succeeded in evading justice. While his crimes may have been well executed, the rabbi's meticulous cleaning of the bathroom was a major factor in hampering the investigation. By removing all traces of blood and other evidence, they destroyed DNA, making it increasingly difficult for investigators to collect evidence. The case stalled because Rod Kovlin confessed to the crime, and a lack of evidence prevented the case from going to trial. 5 years have passed since the investigation into Shields' death began, but no arrests have been made. Police have searched for clues and evidence of Rod Kovlin's involvement in Shields' death for years, but to no avail. However, the case took a turn when Rod Kovlin's mistress, Deborah, came forward. She contacted the police, and they invited her to the station for questioning. Deborah had recently broken up with Rod Kovlin, which prompted her to contact the police. She shared information with the police that Rod Kovlin had conspired to gain custody of the children, but because he was a suspect in Shields' death and did not have custody of the children, he could not access the money Shield left behind. Rod Kovlin hatched a sinister plan to get his hands on Shields' fortune. Rod Kovlin planned to manipulate his 15-year-old daughter into falsely accusing her grandfather, Rod Kovlin's father, of assaulting her. This would result in the grandfather being imprisoned and losing custody of his granddaughter, and Rod Kovlin would give his daughter a large sum of money upon completion of the mission. Meanwhile, Rod Kovlin had been secretly withdrawing funds from the only account he had access to, which was meant for his children's education. His parents discovered that he was misusing the money and were extremely unhappy with his lack of concern for his children's well-being. This led to a heated dispute between Rod Kovlin and his parents. Rod Kovlin's anger towards his parents escalated to the point where he considered harming them. In 2012, he confided in his lover, Deborah, about his plan to have his daughter poison his parents' tea with rat poison. He believed that since his daughter was a minor, she would receive a lighter sentence if caught. Following this, Rod Kovlin came up with several other schemes. He considered burning down his parents' house and trapping them inside by jamming the doors. Rod Kovlin also thought about arranging a fake marriage for his daughter to a Mexican man, which would have forced her to give up part of her inheritance to him. The police were shocked by the details of Rod Kovlin's plans. Deborah secretly collected evidence, storing a large amount of data on hard drives. Deborah realized she was dealing with a psychopath, and she waited until after she broke up with Rod Kovlin to share the evidence with the police. The recordings she collected of Rod Kovlin's conversations with various people. The police now had to listen carefully to these recordings to find conclusive evidence. Deborah's contribution to the investigation was crucial. As the investigators analyzed the recordings, they made a surprising discovery. In a conversation with a friend he met through backgammon, Rod Kovlin casually mentioned that he had keys to Shields' apartment and could enter it at any time. Investigators found that Rod Kovlin was plotting against his own daughter, planning to pin the responsibility for the Shields' demise on her. Thanks to all the information gathered, the police finally had compelling evidence to charge Rod Kovlin with the demise of his wife. On November 1, 2015, Rod Kovlin was arrested. Shields' family awaited the trial of their daughter's perpetrator, but victory was not assured. Rod Kovlin, while incarcerated, shared intimate details of his wife's murder with a fellow inmate. He even reenacted the strangulation, which matched the autopsy results. During the 7-week trial, the jury heard testimony about the heinous crimes he planned to commit, including murdering his wife, targeting his parents, and framing his own children. The jury was horrified by his cold-blooded nature. In March 2019, the court convicted Rod Kovlin of murdering his wife, Shields. Although there was no direct eyewitness, the overwhelming evidence led to a life imprisonment sentence. With the possibility of parole after 25 years, Rod Kovlin will no longer pose a threat to his family or the people of New York. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Carol Maltesi. Carol Nicole Maltesi was born on September 19, 1995, in a small province in Italy, to parents Fabio and Josephine. Her mother was of Italian descent, while her father had Dutch heritage. When Carol was just 4 years old, her parents divorced, and she remained with her mother. Her father moved back to the Netherlands, where he remarried and had more children. Despite her father's lack of support, Josephine chose to stay in Italy and raise Carol on her own. Carol and her mother lived in a small community called Sesto Kenda. Her mother worked multiple jobs to provide Carol with a good education and opportunities for a better life. As a result, Carol grew into a beautiful, kind, and sociable young woman with many friends and an easy rapport with others. She was an active schoolgirl who participated in sports, such as horseback riding, and regularly attended a dance studio. Carol was fluent in 3 languages, loved traveling across Europe, and was an avid reader who could engage in conversations on a wide range of topics. As Carol entered her teenage years, she had many admirers and enjoyed being the center of attention. After completing her secondary education, Carol enrolled in a technical university to study industrial design, arts, and fashion. During her freshman year, Carol discovered she was pregnant after developing a romantic relationship with a young man studying architecture and design. The pregnancy was unexpected, and both Carol and her father were unprepared. Despite the challenges, Carol decided to keep the baby. In 2016, Carol, then 20 years old, gave birth to a son. The arrival of the baby significantly impacted her life. Due to financial constraints, she had to leave school to support themselves and their child. She relocated to Verona in search of better opportunities to provide for their family. Carol found employment as a sales consultant in a cosmetics and perfume retail chain when her son was 1 year old. Meanwhile, her boyfriend worked on projects from home and took care of their son. However, in mid-2019, Carol's life took another turn when she fell in love with Angelo. They began a passionate affair, secretly meeting in hotel rooms and exchanging messages at night. The affair lasted for about 6 months, during which they tried to spend as much time together as possible. But just before the new year, Carol's boyfriend discovered her infidelity and decided to end their relationship. Carol thought it was for the best that she was leaving, as she had already planned to move in with her new boyfriend. However, they faced a challenge. Angelo lived with his parents, and Carol couldn't join him with her child from a previous relationship. They decided to rent a place together, but their plans were disrupted, which left them jobless and unable to afford a home. Carol had to move into Angelo's parents' house and temporarily leave her 4-year-old son with his biological father. Carol struggled financially, but Angelo and his parents supported her as much as possible. She had to rely on them completely, unable to contribute to her son's care. To make matters worse, her mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which required expensive treatment. In desperation, Carol looked for ways to earn money from home to support her son and ailing mother. She turned to social media and created a YouTube channel, sharing her experiences of life in isolation. Although her content didn't attract much attention, her striking appearance drew comments, including some unwanted and inappropriate proposals. A subscriber suggested that Carol create an account on the adult content platform OnlyFans, citing her attractive appearance and potential for quick success. Taking this advice, Carol registered under the pseudonym Charlotte Angel and began posting intimate photos and videos. She quickly gained a large following and started earning a substantial income. As time went on, Carol's content became more explicit and bold and was appreciated by her fans. However, she keeps her work a secret from her boyfriend and relatives. This secrecy was short-lived because an acquaintance of hers discovered her account about 6 months later. Although Carol tried to justify her work as an art form that gave her financial security and personal fulfillment, her acquaintances did not accept it. Friends and acquaintances gradually distanced themselves from her, believing that her work was immoral and fearing that association with her would damage their reputations. Carol saw this reaction as prejudice and remained confident that she would achieve success and wealth as an adult film star. Carol's newfound popularity attracted the attention of adult film studios, and several directors approached her with offers to star in their productions. She soon accepted the invitation and participated in group photo sessions. Unbeknownst to her, her activities went unnoticed, and her boyfriend, Angelo, was shocked to discover that she was not working remotely as a designer as she had claimed she would. He felt lost and didn't know how to react because he had no plans to end their relationship. However, when Angelo's parents learned of Carol's profession, they urged him to end the relationship immediately, fearing she would bring shame to their family. At that time, Carol achieved financial stability thanks to her popular OnlyFans account and increasing salaries from film directors. In interviews, she expressed her intention to eventually complete her education and pursue a career in design or modeling. However, she increasingly loved her current job and was completely immersed in it. Despite her success, Carol faced constant moral pressure from those around her, who judged and tried to shame her. This led to certain psychological trauma. She defended her profession, calling it art, and supported women's right to choose a career without fear of judgment or social consequences. At the age of 25, Carol moved to Rescaldina, a small town in the province of Milan, with the intention of starting again. She planned to abandon her career in the adult entertainment industry and secure a job as a sales consultant at a perfume shop. However, this job of hers only lasted for a short time. A few months later, Carol met David Fontana, a 42-year-old local banker with a passion for photography, especially nude photography. They connected online, where David was searching for photo models for his projects. Carol reciprocated his offer, and upon their first meeting, they felt an intense mutual attraction. Despite being married, David pursued a relationship with Carol and they began dating. Their relationship involved photo sessions that often led to intimate encounters. David soon discovered Carol's past experience in the adult industry and encouraged her to resume her career, citing her talent. However, David's feelings for Carol were complex. He loved her, desired to possess her, and also enjoyed watching her in adult films. In March 2021, David divorced his wife and moved in with Carol, allowing them to explore their most explicit fantasies together. He assisted her in creating content for OnlyFans, a platform where she gained immense popularity. However, David took a share of the profits from their joint work. As Carol's success grew, she began receiving lucrative offers from foreign directors and studios for film shoots. David was a jealous boyfriend who would become annoyed when others showed interest in Carol in public or tried to flirt with her. However, he never interfered with her work as an adult film actress, treating it as a normal job that she felt comfortable with. On the other hand, after Angelo and Carol broke up, Angelo confessed that he had missed her and asked to get back together, saying that he would accept her profession and not restrict her freedom. Carol appreciated Angelo's efforts but revealed that she had already met someone else. Even so, Angelo and Carol continued to communicate. However, when David found out, he became angry, threatened Angelo, and burned his car and finally broke up with Carol. Angelo reported the incident to the police, who issued a restraining order against David, but ultimately found no evidence linking him to arson. As Carol's career took off, Carol frequently traveled for filming and attracted a large following. She was trying to buy a house for herself and her son and planned to leave the adult film industry to focus on raising her son. To achieve this goal, she started creating custom videos for fans, who who would send her scripts and pay her to make their fantasies come true. This idea brought high profits to Carol. Carol and David continued to work together in film despite their personal separation. During a September 2021 film shoot, Carol met co-star Salvatore Galdo, and a romance blossomed. She and Salvatore eventually formalized their relationship, deciding to get married after taking the time to ensure they were both ready to move forward. As they planned their future together, they made a conscious effort to maintain their independence and keep their relationship private. They had learned from past experiences and wanted to approach their new relationship with a clear understanding of each other's needs and boundaries. In the end, Carol and Salvatore were able to build a strong foundation for their relationship, free from the entanglements of their past. They were able to move forward together, focusing on their shared future and leaving their complicated pasts behind. Carol's social media activity had slowed down significantly. Although new posts occasionally appeared on her account, she rarely interacted with anyone, keeping her responses brief. Her latest photos suggested she had recently gone on a seaside vacation, but she hadn't shared her plans with anyone. Everything was happening peacefully. But on March 20, 2022, in a deserted area near Italian Borno, a passerby had made a disturbing discovery. He had been walking along a cliff when he had spotted large black bags of trash on a slope near a body of water. He had felt uncomfortable seeing garbage in such a beautiful location, so he had decided to throw it away. When he had approached one of the bags, he had noticed that it was unusually heavy. His curiosity had turned to horror when he had seen human fingers poking out through the tear in the polyethylene plastic. The man who quickly contacted the police, and when officers arrived, they found 4 bags with a human body that had been divided into 18 parts. Due to the extreme disfigurement, identifying the remains seemed unlikely. Forensic analysis showed that the victim was a young woman who had been deceased for at least 2 months, but the cause of death could not be determined. It was clear that the body had been stored in a freezer before being thrown off a cliff in a remote area, likely with the intention of remaining hidden for a long time. Upon impact, the bags tore, spilling some of the contents. The perpetrator had attempted to conceal the victim's identity by removing any distinctive features, such as tattoos, although damaged remnants of these tattoos still existed. The skin in those areas had been severely damaged with burns from hot objects, cuts, and acid. Despite this, police were able to piece together fragments of the tattoos and compare them with a missing persons database. A breakthrough came when a news report about the body was broadcast, asking anyone who might recognize the described features to come forward. Shortly after, a woman who worked in adult films visited the police station and identified the tattoos as belonging to a colleague who had disappeared in early January. The actress knew the deceased as Charlotte, but did not know her real name. This new information was crucial, as it allowed police to establish the victim's identity and real name. Once her identity was known, it was revealed that she had become engaged to Salvatore Galdo, a colleague, shortly before her disappearance. However, Galdo had not reported his fiancée missing, which raised suspicions. He was detained as the first suspect, but he appeared genuinely distraught over his fiancée's death and puzzled as to why he was under suspicion. According to Salvatore, he had been in regular contact with his fiancée through messaging apps and social media, and he had proof of their correspondence. He claimed that Carol had caught sick and was self-isolating, which is why he hadn't visited her. When asked why he hadn't called to check on her, he said he had spoken with David Fontana, who lived nearby and had promised to care for her. Although Salvatore's story was unclear and unconvincing, his testimony led police to a second suspect who needed to be questioned. However, before police could search for David, he appeared at the station to report a missing person. This was a surprising turn of events. David had not been following the news and did not expect the body to be found so quickly. When he learned that Carol's body had been discovered and identified, he became worried. But when Salvatore was arrested, David realized the police would likely find him, as he had communicated with Salvatore by phone and fabricated a story about taking care of Carol while she had sick. When questioned, David appeared nervous and gave conflicting accounts of his relationship with Carol. He claimed he and Carol were close, but they had not seen each other in months and she had suddenly stopped contacting him. After hours of questioning, David finally cracked under the pressure and began confessing that he had accidentally killed Carol, claiming it had happened in early January during a filming session for a client who had paid a large amount of money. The script had called for him to tie and gag Carol, put a bag over her head, and brutally beat and torture her with tools, including a hammer. David and Carol had agreed that David wouldn't hit her too hard, but she would act like she was in a lot of pain. However, David claimed he had accidentally delivered a hammer blow and fractured her skull. When he removed the bag, he saw that she was about to die, but instead of seeking medical help, he had decided to end her suffering with one last blow of the hammer. But surprisingly, the investigation revealed that the mysterious customer was actually David, who contacted Carol using a fake account. He had come up with a revenge plan because Carol had wanted to leave him. At about 9 p.m. on January 11th, David had used a hammer to kill Carol. The next day, he had bought a large freezer using Carol's credit card, as well as a saw and axe from a hardware store, which he had used to dismember her body. David had attempted to disfigure her body to prevent identification by removing her tattoos and skin and attempting to burn and shred the rest. After murdering Carol, David stored her body parts in bags and kept them in a freezer for over 2 months. During this time, he deceived her relatives and friends by communicating with them through her phone and social media accounts, creating the illusion that she was still alive. By the end of March, David thought it was safe to dispose of the body and dumped it off a cliff in a remote area. He hoped that the remains would either never be found or would have decomposed beyond recognition by the time they were discovered. However, the body was found just 2 days later, and authorities tracked David down within a week. The most puzzling aspect of the case is that none of Carol's relatives or friends reported her missing, despite her disappearance occurring nearly 3 months prior. They were all convinced by the messages and social media posts David had created, and even her fiancé, who thought she was ill, didn't become alarmed when she failed to answer his calls or visit him. If someone had raised the alarm, David would have been tracked immediately through the signal from Carol's phone, which he had kept with him the entire time. At the trial, David expressed remorse and claimed he loved Carol, stating that her death was unintentional. He also said he had planned to end his own life after her death, unable to cope with the grief. Although this statement seemed implausible, the defense maintained that the incident was an unintentional act of violence. On June 12, 2023, David was found guilty of manslaughter. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison and ordered to pay compensation to Carol's son, Carol's mother, and the father of Carol's child, totaling €350,000. Notably, the court did not consider the manner of the killing to be cruel, and the dismemberment of the body was not deemed an aggravating factor. As a result, David may be eligible for parole in the future. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Karen Buckley. Karen Buckley, a 24-year-old student, went missing after a night out with friends at a nightclub on April 11th. Born in 1991 in Cork, Ireland, Karen was the youngest child and only daughter of John and Marion Buckley. Growing up, Karen was known for her kind and caring nature, always willing to lend a helping hand. This trait greatly influenced her career choices. After graduating from St. Mary's Secondary School in Mallow, Karen pursued a degree in nursing at the University of Limerick. Her interest in occupational therapy eventually led her to Glasgow, where she enrolled in a master's program at Caledonian University. Karen arrived in Glasgow in January 2015 and moved into an apartment with 3 other female students who were also new to the area. On April 11, 2015, Karen and her flatmates went to a nightclub about 2 kilometers from their apartment. They arrived around 11:45 p.m. and had a great time. At about 1 a.m., Karen told her friend she was going to the restroom and would return soon. She took her purse and left her jacket on the table where the group was sitting. Her friends continued to enjoy themselves while Karen was away. After a while, they realized Karen had been gone longer than expected and should have returned by then. However, Karen was nowhere to be found. One of her friends searched the club for her but couldn't locate her. Trying to contact her by phone was also unsuccessful. She came with thought maybe Karen had gone home, but it was strange that Karen didn't tell anyone and left her jacket behind. The only explanation they could think of was that Karen might have met someone at the club and left with that person. With this thought in mind, they went to bed. However, when they woke up around noon, Karen's neighbors were surprised to find that she had not returned home. They called and messaged Karen on social media, but she didn't respond. Although they had only known Karen for a few months, they knew that this behavior was out of character for her. Instead of coming up with alternative explanations to reassure themselves, they decided to report her disappearance to the police and inform the Buckley family about what had happened. The Scottish police acted swiftly to find Karen, and her disappearance was publicized in the media. Her parents urged anyone with information to come forward. Meanwhile, detectives reviewed footage from the club's cameras and found evidence of Karen interacting with a mystery man. Within 36 hours, on April 13th, the man was identified as 21-year-old Alexander Pacto and was brought in for questioning. He confirmed that he had met Karen at the club and they had gone to his apartment on Dorchester Avenue, about 3 kilometers away. Alexander also revealed that they had been intimate. Around 4 a.m., Karen decided to leave Alexander's apartment and head home, despite his invitation to stay until morning. Alexander mentioned that during their intimate encounter, Karen accidentally hit her head on the bed corner, resulting in an injury and leaving blood marks on the sheets. The police reacted ambivalently to this information. While Alexander seemed genuinely open, he also appeared to be anticipating and justifying potential evidence that might be discovered in his apartment. On April 13th, a man reported finding a woman's purse to the police. Upon further investigation, it was revealed that the purse was discovered in the park near Alexander's residence, and it belonged to Karen. The purse contained her phone and identification documents. This new evidence lent credibility to Alexander's account of events, suggesting that something might have happened to Karen after she left his apartment. The search for Karen persisted, with hundreds of police officers thoroughly searching parks, forests, bodies of water, and abandoned buildings for any potential clues that could aid in the investigation. At that point, Alexander Pacto was the primary suspect, being the last person to have seen Karen. However, investigators kept his identity confidential and did not disclose any information about him. 2 days after Karen went missing, police entering Alexander's apartment with a search warrant, police were immediately struck by the strong smell of bleach. They also observed that the mattress on the bed was the wrong size. Small, dark red spots were discovered on the bed and in the bathroom, and samples were taken for analysis. Additionally, a toolbox and a large quantity of cleaning supplies were found in the apartment. A police dog trained to detect human remains indicated a potential find near Alexander Pacto's car. While awaiting a search warrant, detectives discovered that Alexander had taken his car to be cleaned the previous day, but the job appeared to have been done poorly. Upon searching the vehicle, investigators found small, dark red spots on the inside of the passenger door and sent samples to the lab for analysis. As the investigation progressed, suspicions mounted that Karen might not be alive, but the search for her continued unabated. After journalists uncovered the suspect's identity, a photo of Alexander Pacto appeared on the front page of a local newspaper the following day. This unexpected move by the press ultimately proved helpful to the investigation. A man recognized Alexander's photo in the newspaper and contacted the police, offering valuable information. He claimed to have worked with Alexander in the past and revealed that Alexander rented a warehouse on a farm outside Glasgow. This farm was approximately 9 kilometers from Alexander's apartment. The police pursued every lead and investigated this new information. The farm owner verified that Alexander indeed rented a storage space from him for £10 a week. Upon inspection of the storage space, the police discovered a 200-liter drum containing Karen's body, which had been dissolved in caustic soda, a highly corrosive alkaline substance capable of breaking down organic materials. They also found a bonfire with remnants of a mattress that Pacto had attempted to burn. On the same day, April 15th, the suspect in Karen Buckley's case was arrested. Faced with substantial evidence, Alexander admitted to taking Karen's life, but claimed it was in self-defense. Police reconstructed a timeline of events based on evidence and Alexander's testimony. On the night of April 11th to 12th, Karen left the club around 1 a.m. The reason for her departure remains unclear. Her friends reported no argument, stating Karen said she was going to the bathroom and would return. It is also unclear why Karen left her jacket behind, even if she had decided to go home. Officers investigating the case reviewed 1,900 hours of surveillance footage. One recording showed Karen encountering Alexander after leaving a club. They walked together towards his car, where it's believed he offered to drive her home. However, once inside the car, Alexander attacked Karen. He struck her 14 times on the head with a large wrench, resulting in her death. Investigators found dark red stains in the car, bathroom, and on Alexander's bed, later confirmed as Karen's dried blood. After disposing of her body, Alexander planned his next moves, starting with getting rid of Karen's purse, which was later recovered and given to the police. Around 2 a.m., he returned home and did something that shocked the detectives. He took the Karen out of the car and carried it into his apartment. Later, at 8 a.m., he used his phone to search online for information about caustic soda. He then visited a shopping center where he purchased 6 liters of caustic soda, a respirator mask, and gloves at 9:42 a.m. To get rid of Karen's body, Alexander realized 6 liters of caustic soda wouldn't be enough. He bought more from another store on his way home and put the body in the bathtub. However, since his neighbor would return home around 8 p.m. and he wouldn't have enough time, he wrapped the body in a blanket and hid it in his bedroom. The next day, April 13th, Alexander threw a wrench into the River Clyde, later found by divers. He then visited a nearby shopping center, about 1.5 miles away, where he sought a consultant's advice on a product that could remove bloodstains from a mattress. He also purchased 2 padlocks that day. He took Karen's belongings to a farm and burned them. Then, he bought a barrel and took it to a rented warehouse. There, he poured in caustic soda and locked the gate with 2 new padlocks. Later that day, at 6 p.m., police visited his home and took him in for questioning. Alexander confessed to his crime, but his motive was unclear. He claimed he killed Karen in self-defense during a car argument, but investigators did not believe him. They thought he was trying to justify his actions. Police suspected that Alexander killed Karen to cover up another crime and then got rid of her body. However, the body was too decomposed to determine if Karen had suffered violence before dying. In September 2015, Alexander Pacto was found guilty and given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 23 years. Through his lawyer, he apologized to Karen's family and expressed remorse. Alexander told his lawyer that he was too drunk on the night of the incident to remember why he killed Karen. If he had not pleaded guilty, he would have been eligible for parole in 25 years instead of 23. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Aya Hashim. The Hashim family moved to the UK from Lebanon in November 2011, seeking a safer and more promising future. Aya's father, Ismail, wanted his children to have a good education and become valuable member of society. He applied for asylum for himself and his family, and after receiving a residence permit, they settled in Blackburn. Aya was a driven and ambitious young woman with big plans for her life. She was a law student at Salford University. Tragically, her parents' hopes for a better life were shattered when Aya was killed in a senseless act of violence. On May 17, 2020, Aya left her house to go to a nearby supermarket at around 3 p.m. However, she never returned home. About an hour later, Aya's father went out to look for her. Aya's mother searched online and discovered the news that a woman had been shot in their neighborhood. Soon after, Aya's parents received the devastating news that their daughter had been killed in the shooting. Aya was walking on King Street when a car drove by with multiple occupants. One of the individuals in the car fired 2 shots, one of which fatally hit Aya. 19-year-old Aya Hashim was fatally shot on King Street and died the same day despite medical efforts. The police do not think the incident was motivated by racism or religious hatred. Deputy Chief Terry Woods is seeking the public's help in gathering evidence. He asks anyone with dashcam footage or surveillance cameras to come forward if they have recordings of a green Toyota Avensis car or any suspicious activity. According to Deputy Chief Woods, Aya was an innocent bystander who was shopping for her family when she was accidentally caught in the crossfire. The shooting involved a green Toyota Avensis car. Witnesses report that 2 rounds were fired from the vehicle, and sadly, Aya was hit. Later that day, police discovered the Toyota Avensis car involved in the shooting abandoned near the scene of the crime. They also obtained CCTV footage of the incident. The footage shows that at 3:03 p.m. Aya is walking along the sidewalk. The Toyota mentioned earlier drives past her. The rear side window on the left is down. The shooter makes a fatal shot. The bullet goes through her and hits the pole. For ethical reasons, the police did not reveal footage of she falling to the ground. After reviewing the video recording, it's clear that there were at least 2 individuals in the car, the driver and the shooter. Following the shooting, the perpetrators quickly fled the scene and abandoned the vehicle on a nearby street. Within 2 hours, the police located the car and initiated a search for its owner. Aya Hashim was caught in the crossfire of a shooting incident that occurred near Khan's car wash. Following her death, the police launched a massive operation to apprehend the suspects, who had fled the UK, with the assistance of international law enforcement. 8 individuals were initially charged in connection with her death. Aya's death was ultimately determined to be a tragic accident. She was an innocent bystander. The shooting was actually a targeted attack on the owner of Khan's car wash, who was a competitor of Pharaoh Suleiman. It was Suleiman who allegedly hired a hitman to take out Khan, but the bullet mistakenly hit Aya instead. According to the video recording, at the time of the incident, Aya was standing a few feet away from a pole. The first bullet fired missed its intended target and hit something near a man, as evidenced by the splashing water. The key point here is that the shooter made a mistake. The person they aimed at was not the business owner, but rather an employee who was mistaken for Khan. During the second shot, Aya was positioned between the shooter and the employee. The bullet struck her in the left side of her chest, passed through her body, and then hit the pole. The car immediately fled the scene. The car wash owner, Khan, witnessed Aya falling to the ground and rushed to her aid, calling emergency services in the process. He described the events, stating that he had seen the car and the gun, and then the assailant sped away. According to him, they returned and started shooting, aiming the gun at him, which left him confused. To better understand the crime, let's examine the roles of the individuals involved. We'll start with the mastermind, Pharaoh Suleiman. Pharaoh Suleiman was a successful businessman with a loving family. Suleiman owned a thriving tire shop that had gained significant popularity over time. The business provided him with a substantial income, enabling him and his family to live a comfortable life. He was also active on social media, frequently sharing photos of himself driving expensive cars, giving his followers a glimpse into his life. When his business began to decline, he devised a plan to eliminate his competitor, Khan. Despite being a potential suspect due to his motive, Suleiman went ahead with the plan. He enlisted the help of Ayaz Hussein, Zamir Raja, and Anthony Ennis. The perpetrators conducted a surveillance mission the day before the crime, driving near the car wash to inspect the area. Additionally, Abu Bakr Saisha purchased the Toyota used in the crime with money provided by Suleiman. Kashif Manzoor ensured the car was in working condition by performing technical checks and addressing any malfunctions. Uthman Saisha and his girlfriend, Judy Chapman, played a supporting role in the crime. They drove the shooter and driver to the location of the Toyota in their Ford Fiesta and then picked them up after the crime was committed, they abandoning the Toyota on a nearby street. According to the inquest, at 1:14 p.m., Judy Chapman and Uthman Saisha picked up Raja and Ennis from Bolton and drove them 13 miles to Blackburn, where the Toyota was parked. Kashif Manzoor made sure the Toyota was ready as all four men drove to Blackburn. However, when they stopped a couple of miles from the car wash, the Toyota wouldn't start due to a dead battery. Manzoor jumped the battery using another car's battery and some wires. With the car started, Manzoor handed it over to Raja and Ennis, then returned to the service station where Suleiman was waiting, watching from a front row seat to see what would happen. The Toyota approached the corner with its windows rolled down. Ennis and Raja circled the block several times, waiting for the perfect moment to act. They needed to be on the same side of the street as Khan's car wash. Meanwhile, Manzoor and Suleiman were observing the situation unfold. On the fourth pass by the car wash, the Toyota slowed down. Coincidentally, Khan was on the street at that exact moment. However, the shooter, Zamir Raja, made a mistake and fired the first shot at a different employee, not Khan. Fortunately, the first bullet missed its target. But the second bullet hit Aya. Following the shooting, Raja and Ennis fled the scene, abandoning their vehicle and getting into a car with Judy Chapman and Uthman Saisha, who drove them away from Blackburn. When police reviewed the video of Suleiman's store, Ayaz Hussein entered the store. Suleiman signaled to the others who were aware of the incident to leave the room and go to the second floor. Abu Bakr Saisha, who had bought the Toyota involved in the crime, was sitting behind them. When Abu Bakr Saisha overheard the police radio mention that the perpetrator's car had been found, he immediately got up to discuss something with Suleiman. 9 days after Aya's murder, Zamir Raja, the shooter, fled to Portugal and met Anthony Ennis, the driver of the Toyota, at Lisbon Airport. Both men had escaped the country. Meanwhile, the police were arresting the individuals involved in the crime. Pharaoh Suleiman, the mastermind, was arrested on May 18th, the day after Aya's murder. Abu Bakr Saisha was arrested on May 19th, and Judy Chapman and Uthman Sada were arrested on May 20th. Ayaz Hussein and Kashif Manzoor were arrested on May 21st. Zamir Raja, who had hoped to return to England without being detected, was arrested at a London train station on June 6th. Anthony Ennis was caught in Spain on July 4th and extradited to the UK. Aya Hashim was murdered and Khan, the owner of a car wash, was nearly killed in a violent crime. Several suspects were charged, and at first, all of them denied any involvement. However, as the investigation continued and the pressure mounted, their stories began to contradict each other as they tried to downplay their roles in the crime. As the suspects' testimonies became more inconsistent, they started to turn on each other, revealing crucial details about the crime to the police. Each suspect tried to avoid a long prison sentence by blaming the others. On August 5th, 2021, the court delivered its verdicts, resulting in severe sentences for all those involved. Pharaoh Solon, who had a prior conviction for a fatal hit-and-run incident in 2001, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years. Raja, the shooter, was also given a life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years. According to reports, he was paid $500 for his involvement in the crime. The driver, Anthony Ennis, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 33 years. Ayaz Hussein, who orchestrated the crime, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 32 years. Abu Bakr Saisha, who bought the getaway car, will serve at least 28 years. Uthman Satatya, who arranged for the shooter and driver to be transported, will also serve at least 28 years. And Kashif Manzoor, who made sure the car was working on the day of the crime, will serve at least 27 years. The judge was critical of the defendants, stating that they showed no regret for their actions after the shooting. Instead of taking responsibility, they tried to deceive and manipulate their way out of trouble. When that failed, they turned on each other in an attempt to save themselves. Judy Chapman was found guilty in October 2021 of involuntary deprivation of life. She was given a 15-year prison sentence for driving the car involved in the crime. However, investigators have since discovered that other individuals were involved in the crime. This was revealed through analysis of communication between the convicted parties. Louis Otway, a 42-year-old from Manchester, was sentenced to life in prison on May 5, 2023, with a minimum term of 32 years. During his trial, evidence revealed that Otway acted as an intermediary between Ayaz Hussein, Zamir Raja, and Anthony Ennis. Specifically, he assisted Hussein in committing a crime. Another person, Banbridge, was also involved in the case. She was the 10th person to be found guilty. Prosecutors said that Banbridge met with Raja and Ennis in Bolton, took their phones, and turned them off. Then, she drove to Trafford and turned the phones back on in different locations, making it seem like Raja and Ennis were in Greater Manchester, not Blackburn, when a shooting happened. This was done to create a fake alibi for the two men. Banbridge, 32, admitted to conspiracy to pervert the course of justice and was sentenced to 23 months in prison on August 11, 2023. This was the last conviction in the case of Aya Hashim. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Lin family. Min Lin and Yun Lin's romance began in the late 1980s when they met at an Australian university. They both came from China and had moved to Australia to further their studies. Min had completed her bachelor's degree and was doing an internship, while Yun participated in a student exchange program. They met each other after meeting accidentally in the university hallway. After graduating, they got married and settled in North Epping, Sydney, where their love continued to grow into a strong, close-knit family. Min and Yun had their first child, Brenda Lin, in August 1994. She was mostly known as Brenda. Their son, Henry, was born in 1997, and their youngest child, Terry, was born in 2000. At the start of the 2000s, Min and Yun decided to start a business, opening a small newsroom. Through their hard work, it became a successful news agency with a publishing arm on Rose Street. The Lin family's business success had brought them economic security. A spacious house, a luxury car, and good education for their children. Min had handled business affairs, while Yun had focused on taking care of their home and children. Neighbors had respected the Lin family for their hard work and kindness. As parents, Min and Yun had been appreciated for their care and love for their children. They had never quarreled. Their children had been very obedient and close-knit. Brenda, the eldest daughter, had stood out for her beauty, good academic performance, and kindness towards animals. Henry and Terry, two sons, had been both active and loved sports, especially soccer. As the Lin family had settled into life in Australia and their assets had increased, they had begun bringing relatives from China to live with them. In the early 2000s, Min's parents had been the first to move to North Epping and had helped with childcare. A few years later, Yun's parents also moved to Sydney suburb, with Min and Yun buying them a small house. Yun's sister, Irene, came to live with the Lin family, assisting with household chores and the children. By this time, the Lin family business was generating substantial income, reportedly nearing $1 million annually. In late 2007, Min Lin's younger sister, Kathy, and her husband, Robert, moved to Australia in search of better opportunities. They had visited before and briefly lived in Melbourne but had returned to China. This time, they were determined to settle in Australia for good. Robert was a former successful ear, nose, and throat doctor in China, decided to try his hand at entrepreneurship. He and his wife invested all their savings in a restaurant in Sydney, but the business struggled and eventually closed. Robert's subsequent attempts to open a cafe or snack bar also failed due to his lack of business skills and financial management experience. Lin's family had a habit of meeting every Friday night. Their last family gathering took place on July 17, 2009, at Kathy and Min's parents' home. The next morning, July 18, the Lin family's store had not been open, making longtime customers feel surprised and confused. This sudden closure had raised their concerns. One of them tried to contact Min multiple times but was unsuccessful, so they called Min's sister Kathy to see if she knew what was going on. Kathy was surprised and worried because her brother never closed the shop without making arrangements first. Kathy tried to call Min and Yun, but they didn't answer. She also tried calling their home phone, but no one picked up. Kathy and her husband Robert were worried, so they decided to visit Min's house to make sure everything was okay. They arrived around 9 a.m. and saw the family car. They went to the house. The front door was unlocked, but there was no sign of Min or his family inside. Kathy went upstairs. When she opened the bedroom door, she was shocked by what she saw. The room was covered in blood, including the floor, walls, ceiling, furniture, and curtains. Yun Lin's body was on the floor near the bed, and she had been severely mutilated. Kathy screamed and stumbled backward, was shocked by the gruesome scene. In the room next to where Irene slept, a terrible scene took place. Irene lay motionless on the bed, her face beaten and bruised. The bedrooms of Henry, 12, and Terry, 9, also revealed horrifying scenes. Both were brutally beaten to death. Their bodies were found in separate corners of the room. Min Lin's body was found in his bedroom, covered with a blanket soaked in blood. He was killed in the same way as his family. It seems he was the first victim, followed by his wife, her sister, and then the two boys. Kathy immediately contacted emergency services. After Kathy's urgent call, Robert left to fetch the Lin's parents, who lived about 10 kilometers from the crime scene. Police and paramedics arrived quickly, encountering what they described as one of the most horrific crime scenes they had witnessed. Tragically, the Lin family members were all killed. Each person died from multiple blows to the head with a heavy blunt object similar to a hammer. However, the crime weapon was not found at the scene. The initial examination of the crime scene did not reveal any important clues. The killer did not leave the murder weapon behind, and they did not take any valuables or money. This suggests that the main goal was to kill the Lin family, not to steal from them. At first, investigators thought there might be multiple attackers because it seemed unlikely that one person could overpower so many people. However, evidence showed that the children were awake during the attack and tried to escape. There were blood stains and splatters throughout the house. Oddly, all adult victims had head injuries and showed signs of strangulation. Investigators found identical bloody shoe prints in each room with a tread pattern. Although they could not identify the shoe brand, they determined the shoe size. No fingerprints were found, suggesting the killers wore gloves. Initially, the police had no leads or theories about the perpetrator's identity. Friends and neighbors of the Lin family all said that the family had no known enemies, making the motive for the brutal massacre unclear. The attack occurred between midnight and 3 a.m. on July 18th. Brenda Lin, the eldest child and now sole survivor of the Lin family, was attending school in New Caledonia at the time of the tragedy. She learned about the incident through social media and initially did not believe it was related to her family, but the truth devastated her. Brenda soon received a call from her Aunt Kathy, who tearfully confirmed the devastating news. Brenda was immediately flown back to Sydney, where Kathy and Robert met her at the airport. She then moved in with them, as her family's home was closed off as a crime scene. The following day, Brenda was taken to the police station, overcome with grief, to be questioned. However, she had no new information to share, stressing that her family had no enemies and hadn't noticed anything unusual before her trip. After her family's passing, Brenda inherited a significant fortune, including property and the family business. Since she was still a minor and in school, her guardians, Kathy and Robert, took on the responsibility of managing the estate. Brenda's grandparents offered their support, but Kathy and Robert insisted on being her caregivers. Robert even threatened to take legal action if the grandparents sought custody, claiming they were too old to care for a teenager. The matter was eventually resolved, with Brenda remaining in the care of her aunt and uncle. The Lin's shop and publishing business reopened under new management after a temporary closure. However, Brenda had not yet taken over the business operations. Robert began reviewing the family's financial records, including bank accounts, savings, and real estate. Beside that, experts thoroughly investigated the crime scene, documenting every detail, but no concrete leads were found. They believed the killer acted alone and entered the house quietly, possibly through and with a key. The killer wore size 9.5 shoes with a distinctive tread pattern and likely used a hammer as the lethal weapon, which was never found. The killer wore gloves, leaving no fingerprints or foreign DNA behind. One notable detail was the presence of blood stains on the doorknobs of each bedroom where the killings occurred, indicating the killer's bloodied gloves had touched them. However, there were no blood stains on Brenda's room doorknob, suggesting the killer knew she was not present. The Lin family tragedy received extensive media coverage. However, with no concrete evidence or suspects, numerous implausible theories surfaced. Speculation about the family's supposed vast wealth leading to their murder. As the investigation had stalled, no suspects had emerged for the probe. The theory of a robbery had eventually been abandoned because the killer had left money and valuables intact, suggesting the sole motive had been to kill family members. Furthermore, the fact that the house had lost power on the night of the murder suggested that the murderer had been someone who was familiar with the location of the electrical panel. The attacker's ability to control the house in darkness showed that he had prior knowledge of the house's layout. When reviewing the case, an investigator replayed Kathy's emergency call looking for missed clues. An important hint was detected in the recording. The recording captured Kathy's frantic attempts to explain the situation, her words interrupted by crying and sobbing. At the end of the call, Kathy mentioned her husband's name and talked to him in Cantonese. This piqued the investigators' interest, causing them to translate her words. The translation revealed that Kathy was pleading with Robert not to leave Kathy home alone. This was significant since Robert had left Kathy at the scene of the crime to pick up her parents, despite the potential danger. With 5 people brutally murdered and the killer possibly still inside, Robert's calm aroused suspicion, as if he already knew for certain that Kathy was safe. The police finally identified Robert as the main suspect. A crucial discovery was that Robert had a key to Min's house. which had been given to Robert shortly before the tragedy. However, Robert never mentioned this during questioning, and his wife Kathy was unaware that Min had given him the key. It was Brenda who unintentionally revealed this important information to investigators. Further investigation showed that Robert's claim of being a successful ear, nose, and throat doctor was false. Although he had a medical degree, he had never had a stable job in the field. There were rumors that he had fled to Australia to avoid punishment for alleged bribery charges in China. In Australia, Robert failed to establish a successful career and wasted his remaining savings on unsuccessful business ventures. After moving to North Keeping, he became idle, relying on his wife's income. Once the guardianship papers for Brenda were finalized, Robert acted as if he had inherited the Lin family's estate. His first move was to force Yun's parents out of their home, which Min had bought for them. Although the house remained in Min's name, Min and Kathy's parents were still allowed to stay in their own home that was also purchased for them. Based on this information, investigators suspected he had a long-standing plot to usurp Min family property, money, and profitable business. However, the police could not arrest Robert yet due to a lack of concrete evidence. Through a combination of interrogation, surveillance, and other methods, the investigation team was granted permission to install hidden cameras in the Robert household. They hoped to gather the evidence needed to prove Robert's guilt. The breakthrough came sooner than expected, starting with an unexpected revelation from Kathy during an interrogation. Kathy mentioned Robert's preference for a specific brand of shoes. A few years ago, Robert bought 2 pairs of limited edition sneakers that he really liked. He had worn out one pair and thrown it away, but kept the other pair at home. What's important to note is that Robert's shoe size, 9.5, matched the size of the shoes worn by the killers. The crucial evidence was caught on a hidden camera, which showed Robert deliberately destroying the box that held the remaining pair of shoes. A search warrant was issued for Robert's home. During the search, police found a new pair of size 9.5 sneakers with the same pattern as the pattern collected at the crime scene. In the garage, they discovered a small bloodstain, which was later confirmed by a forensic examiner to be a bloodstain containing DNA from all 5 victims of the Lin family, linking it to the crime scene. In May 2011, 2 years after the tragedy, Robert was officially arrested. He denied involvement, claiming the blood stains in his garage appeared after returning from Lin's house following the tragedy. He also downplayed the importance of the sneakers, saying they were new and he threw away the old shoes. While in prison awaiting trial, Robert shared a cell with a number of informants whom the police had arranged. During a conversation, he confessed to carefully planning the crime and covering his tracks. He bought the weapon in a store without surveillance cameras and gave his wife tea so she wouldn't wake up while he was committing the crime. He removed the hammer, shoes, gloves, and clothes so police would never find them. At trial, Robert denied everything. The only evidence against him is what the informant said and some indirectly clues. The jury failed to find Robert guilty and he was released on bail in December 2015. But when the trial resumed in June 2016, another informant said Robert had confessed to being haunted by Brenda since she was 13 years old. Brenda was questioned again and tearfully said Robert forced her to have sex when she first moved in. She kept silent about the abuse for years because she was afraid of what Robert might do. With this new information and other evidence, Robert was officially convicted of all charges. He was given 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, 1 for each murder. All of his appeals were rejected.